Hi everyone, what I'd like to do here is show you a demo of how to do a gallery. You could also do a slider the same way with the technique I'll show you, but the main goal will be a gallery. I'm going to do this in HTML5 Canvas, but I'm going to start this out as an ActionScript file because some of you might have started a gallery this way or have a gallery you've used before that started off as ActionScript 3. So I have a blank file here, essentially. It's 800 by 600, and I have a few things in my library already that I imported. I have a piece of audio that's a click sound, and I have large images, and I also have thumbnail images. So let's go ahead and get this set up. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a layer for my thumbnails, so I'll call this thumbnails. Actually, first I'm going to change the color on this because I'd like a black background. So hit properties and black. There we go. So I have a thumbnails layer. I'm going to go to my library and I'm just going to drag out these thumbnail images. Just align them a little bit here. I'm not going to be too perfect just because we'll move along with the demo. So I have some thumbnail images here. So these are going to act as buttons. When you click on these, what it's going to do is it will change the large image, which will fill up the most of the screen here. One other thing I'd like to do here is I'm going to show you a couple different types of buttons we can do. So I'm going to just make a little circle that will be, you see these for sliders a lot where you have little circle buttons that kind of indicate, you can click on them and which one you're on. So I'm going to draw, I have the selection tool, and I'm just going to select all of that there. I'm going to right click and I'm going to convert to a symbol. Make sure this is a button type, and I'm just going to call this button button underscore white button. And sort of messed the circle up there, but that's okay, you can't really tell. So I'm going to copy, actually let me make it a little bigger. My warped circle here. Well, that's a pretty sad button, but we're going to work with it. So I'm going to copy Control or Command C, Command on a Mac, and paste Command V. I'm just going to move this down with my keyboard and create 3 buttons here for 3 images, and copy paste again. Let's move this over here. Yeah, that doesn't look too great, but sure, we'll go with it. I also like these on a different layer than my thumbnail layer, so I'm going to select all those and just do edit cut. You could also hit Command or Control X. I'm going to make a new layer, and we'll call this white buttons, something like that. And then I will edit, paste in place. I'll put them back where they were. I'm going to make them a little bit lower as well. One thing I'm also going to do, a little delays on my computer today. I'm going to turn these thumbnails into buttons because they're going to act like buttons as well. So right click, convert to symbol, make sure it is a button type, and I will call this btn underscore image 1. Same thing for the other two, right click, convert to symbol, btn underscore image 2. Again, this one, convert to symbol, btn underscore image 3. Alright, so we have 3 things that will act as buttons. Alright, so I'm going to make a new layer, and we'll just call this my image layer. And let's create some labels. So new layer there, labels. Now I'm going to use this little slider down here, which is in Flash CC, and make my timeline blocks a little bit larger. So what I'm going to do is actually create some labels to mark different parts of my timeline where different things are. So I have this first keyframe selected in frame 1. I'm going to go to properties, and at the top you'll see label and name. So I'm going to give this a label name of start. I'm going to jump off to frame 10 here, insert blank keyframe. Now I kind of jumped out this far just so when you have room it'll actually, you can see the label in the timeline, which is kind of nice. So this is where image 1 is going to sit. In frame 20, insert blank keyframe. I'm just right clicking. Right click, insert blank keyframe. So image 2, image 3. Image 3 will be here. Now I don't need a keyframe at 40, but I'm just going to extend my timeline. So right click and insert frame. Now click each one of those keyframes. Go to label name. I'm going to go image 1, image 2, and image 3. And you see those labels in the timeline. Now we're going to need our buttons and thumbnails to go that full length of the timeline as well, so they're always available. So I'm going to click in the white buttons layer. I'm going to hold shift so I get both of these frames, and then I'm going to right click and insert frame, and that will extend the tween span for each of those items. So now we basically need to fill in what we want to see for each of these blocks. So in my first frame I'm going to give some kind of introduction. You could have an image there, or text, or something. You could also just have the first image of the gallery. That's a possibility. If this were a slider, you would probably just have the first image there. But I'm just going to do a little bit of text here. I'm just going to say welcome. Good enough here. So let's say we have welcome at the start. So then when we get to image 1 though, we want to see image 1. So I'm going to right click, insert a blank keyframe there, and then go to my library and get the big image for image 1 and place it. Now I want these images to be in the same exact position, and I could look at my properties and look at my X and Y values. Another thing I could do is just swap my image 1 here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to go to the end of the tween span I'm looking at, right click and insert frame. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create keyframes at these 2 spots. Right click, insert keyframe, not a blank keyframe, but a keyframe. When you do it that way, you'll now see for image 2 and image 3 we have this image, but I'm just going to swap that out, but it'll keep in the same position. So select that keyframe, select that image, make sure you grab that, go to properties, and we're going to hit swap. And then I'm going to go to image 2 big. Okay. And that should be, yeah, it's pretty much in the same spot. Perfect. We want it to look the same. We don't want the image jumping around as we click from image to image. Then we'll go to image 3, click that keyframe, click that image, properties, swap, image 3 big. Okay. So now we have the different images in here. So the last part is we need to add code to make this so that when you click on the thumbnails it jumps from image to image. Now I have a different tutorial that shows you how to do this in ActionScript 3. It's not too tough to do there. But I actually want to do this in JavaScript because we're going to do HTML5 JavaScript version of this. So you might be at this point where you have an ActionScript 3 file already, but you want to do this in HTML. This is advantageous because HTML5 and JavaScript will be viewable from just about any browser. where a Flash Swift file, or the SWF, will not work on Apple devices because they do not have Flash players built in. So what we're going to do is convert this to an HTML5 Canvas file. Now you can also, if you had started off from the beginning, you could also have new and then HTML5 Canvas. But if you had an ActionScript or started off that way, you can go Command Convert to HTML5 Canvas from AS3 document format. And that will convert it. Now if you have anything in your movie that is going to give you everything isn't compatible between the two versions, so Flash will give you some warnings if there's anything problematic. So it doesn't want me to save it as a let's try this again. So back to my original file. It doesn't like you to save it as the exact same thing, so we'll just call this version 3 save. Alright, so now we have this so a couple warning signs about some text things not supported. We're pretty much okay though. Now, let's go back and take a look at what we need to do to add in the code necessary. So the first thing we need to do, let's actually test this in a browser. The way we can do this is we can I have a Mac, so I'm going to hit Command Enter or Command Return. If you have a PC, you can do Control Enter or Return. And what that does is pulls up your work in a browser window. And so you'll see what's happening. The timeline is running, and it's running through each of these images. So we want it to stop, so it's not just moving like that. So I'm going to jump to the timeline. I'm going to click up here on frame 1, and I'm going to look at something called code snippets. Now you can get in here and you can actually write your JavaScript in your Actions panel, but code snippets make things a little bit easier. So Window, Code Snippets, and you have ActionScript ones and HTML5 Canvas ones. We want those, and we want timeline navigation. So conveniently, there's one called Stop at this frame. If I just double click that, it's going to add the code that I need in the keyframe where I was at. And it created a new layer called Actions. That's where it likes to put all of your code, and it puts it at the very top. So convenient location there. So now if I test my movie, we're stopped at the welcome page, and this is where it's going to stay until we start to click and do things. So the last thing we need to do is make these buttons actually do something when you click them. Let's test the movie again, and you'll notice a couple things. So we made all of these buttons. Here's the browser. So you'll notice when So one thing you'll notice, it's a little bit of a bug right now. Hopefully they'll fix it at some point. But if you roll over these buttons, typically in Flash, if you roll over a button, the cursor changes to a little hand, and that's how you know it's a button. So I'm going to close this. And if you look at this warning here, it actually says content with both bitmaps and buttons may generate local security errors in some browsers if you test it locally. So when we're publishing it and looking at it in a browser, it's actually looking at it locally instead of it being on a server. Now the thing is if we upload this up to a server, we wouldn't have this error and our buttons would behave normally. So it's not going to work properly, and the reason why is because we have these images in here. So I want to do a quick demo where I'm just going to delete these off the stage for a minute and show you the difference. So I just hit delete there, and it's taking a second. Now I'm going to test the movie again, and you'll see what I mean, what the difference is. Let me drag my browser over. So you'll see when I roll over it, we get this hand, and that means everything's functioning properly. So we're going to work with this just for now. So, all right, let's add the code that's going to make these buttons actually work. For these buttons, make sure that you don't have any keyframes throughout the timeline. we want the same button to work for each thing. Now, for each button, we need to give them what's called an instance name, and that's how the code identifies the button. So select that first button. We're going to call this button 1. Second one, we'll just call this button 2. Grab the third one, we'll just call this button 3. So now they have names. Now we just have to add the code. Now you could go in and write this code yourself, but again, we have our code snippets, so I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to click, actually it should put it in my actions layer for me, so make sure you have that first button selected. And we have one that's called click to go to frame and stop. So what we wanted to do is go to the image 1 frame when the button 1 is clicked and stop on the timeline. We don't want the timeline to keep moving. Sometimes you might want that, but in our case we don't. So I'm just going to double click that bit of code there. And it writes that code and actually puts it right below our stop that we had before. And just by default it says go to and stop frame number 5. Well, we don't really want it to go to a numbered frame. We want it to go to one of these labels that we've set up. So I'm going to make quotes. You could put a different frame number, but labels are better in case you change things around on your timeline. You don't have to renumber everything. So you need quotes, and I'm going to call it image 1. And that will pretty much do it. It'll work. So let's test it. Let me drag my browser over. And now this time when I click on this first button, it's going to jump to image 1 and stop there. That's what we want. So now what we have to do is add this to the other 2 buttons. We'll select button 2 there. And go to frame and stop. Double click that. Now we got frame 5 again. And change that to image 2. So let's select the third button there, go to frame and stop, and 1 second, and frame 5 again, we just change that to image 3, and quote. So we're good there. So let's test this. Drag my browser over. All right, so now we have 1, 2, 3. And that gives us our clickable gallery. So we want to do the same kind of thing with thumbnails though, because thumbnails will give you a little bit easier, but just for easiness, I wanted to show you this in a local browser and show you how it functions. Because once you add those images in there, as those button images, things get messed up and they don't respond. So we have to view that on the on a server. You could also set up a local server, which is good kind of thing for web developers to do, or you could just upload to a external server and test your files there. It's kind of more of a pain, but that's the only way it's going to work. So let's go back here, and I am going to, we'll just leave those there, and I need to put my thumbnails back. So let's go to the library. Now note that your thumbnail images, you can put those wherever you want. So if you'd rather be down the side, that's fine. But I'm going to put them on the bottom. It could be nice to build a little interface around all this so that it's not just this plain black gallery. You could put these thumbnails like in a little shelf of some sort. You could have background graphics, frames, and that kind of stuff. So I have my 3 thumbnails. I'm going to have to name these again. They're instance names. Oh, I also have to convert them to buttons again as well. So right click and let's see, convert to symbol, button. Actually, we might have the buttons in the library now that I think about it. Yeah, we already made these, so let's take those instead of the bitmaps. So we already made the buttons, so I'm just going to drag them over from the library. And button 3. So now we have 3 buttons, but we still have to give them instance names. Those probably aren't lined up too well, but we'll go ahead and move on. So they need instance names. So this We already used button 1, button 2, button 3, so you don't want to have the same names. So we'll say thumb button 1, thumb button 2, and thumb button 3. Now we just need to add the code snippet to make it work. So select the button, go to frame and stop, replace the 5 with image 1, select the next one, go to frame and stop, place the code, quote, image 2, good, grab the third one, double click, go to frame and stop, place the 5 with image 3. Now that really should do the trick and should work. Let's test it. I'm pretty sure it's not going to work. It's even messed up my top buttons here, and these are not functioning as buttons. So what I'm going to do, let's take a look at where these files went. So here's where these files went. Few things that it creates when you test your movie. When I'm testing my movie, I'm actually just publishing it. We get our HTML file, we get a JavaScript file, which has your code and kind of controls everything. We also have an images folder with all our images. Now when you upload this stuff to a server, you got to have all of this go with it. Otherwise your files are not going to work. I just remembered too, there's one more thing I want to add to this, and this is audio. I want to add a little bit of a sound effect to these buttons. So I'm going to click into one of these buttons. I'll just do it on one of them for now to show you. Another thing you can do, which is nice, is add some kind of hover or rollover effect. You can do that by clicking on the over state, right-clicking, insert keyframe, and I'm actually going to just use my transform tool and make it a little bigger when they roll over that. So the up state, it'll just be like that, and when they roll over, it'll be up like that. And we can also do that for the down state. So I'm just going to right click on the down state and hit insert frame, so that extends that. Now the hit state just shows what area is clickable. If you don't put anything in there, it just uses the graphics that are there. But one other thing for the down state, I'm going to right click and actually turn this into a keyframe, is I want to add audio just for the down state. So click that keyframe and go to library or properties, and if you have a sound in the library, you will be able to select that. So I have an MP3 and it's the click sound. I'm going to add that there, and you'll see I've got a little bit of a waveform in this keyframe now. And so now when I click down on the thumbnail, it will play that click sound. So I'm going to test, and that publishes and creates my files. But I'm not going to be able to test it locally, so I'm going to have to upload it. So one other thing about my files here, now I have a sounds folder. This has to get uploaded as well. So I'm going to jump over to Dreamweaver. I kind of already have this set up with my website and my folder location and all that kind of stuff. And you can also use any FTP client to upload your files as well. So I have this folder where these files are with Flash Gallery. If I kind of uncurl the folder there, you have my images, sound. So I want the HTML, the JavaScript, the images, and the sounds, and I'm going to upload all that to the server. So give that a second. So then I have this over here in my browser, the location, and here is my stuff. You'll notice that my buttons now work as buttons. If I roll over this, I get the rollover, and as I click on these, if I click that first button, I get a sound. You may not be hearing it on your side because I have it coming through my headset here, but you could actually go to this link. I'll leave that up if you want to hear it for yourself. But there's a little bit of a click sound, and these buttons flip between the images. So everything is HTML, JavaScript. There's no SWF, Swift in here, so this will work. on an iPad, on most browsers, and will work pretty nicely for you.